Namaste, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Headlines with me, Deepthi Verma, for Organiser. Today, we are being joined by the ex-president of ICCR, the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. And we're going to talk to him about all that ICCR does in promoting India's cultural relations and its role in geopolitics, and also just the idea of soft power, as well as reclaiming our cultural symbols from across the world, and how they've spread across the world, and how we need to maybe reclaim them in their original glory. So thank you, Vinay ji. Thank you so much for joining us. First, I want to ask you, please take our younger viewers through what exactly ICCR does.
Well, Indian Council for Cultural Relations, popularly known as ICCR, is a government institution established way back in 1950.
Yeah.
And the idea, although there is nothing like a written history of ICCR, or hardly any documents are there which would provide us some kind of an insight into the thinking of the rulers at that point of time. So one can only guess that this was established basically to promote understanding of Indian culture in various countries. What India is, what is the idea of India, and what is Indian culture, through various activities like seminars, symposia, some kind of dance performances, music, creating awareness and undertaking training of Indian languages. All these were the assigned kind of duties of ICCR right since its beginning. And since the core of the activities were concerning the Department of Education or the Ministry of Education. Yeah. At that point of time, it was a part of the Ministry of Education. Mm-hmm. Later on, in the 70s, Mrs. Indira Gandhi shifted this from Education to Ministry of External Affairs. And from there onwards, it is an autonomous institution under the supervision of the Ministry of External Affairs. It's a society, registered society. All the government-appointed persons are there. And we have some 37 centers abroad. ICCR is working through these centers. These centers typically undertake activities in education and training of Indian languages, Indian music, Indian instrumental music. Then it also organizes some seminars, symposia, and things like that. And also tries to, especially from developing countries, seek foreign students coming to India, making India as their center for their destination for career building or higher education.
So it moved from education to external relations, you said, because cultural diplomacy became important at that time?
In a way, yes, because most of the activities, basically, as it happens, if the audience or the clientele, to use the marketing term, is abroad, essentially, then it makes sense, perhaps, to have it as a part of the Ministry of External Affairs. That must have been the thinking behind, as I understand.
And also, when you say today, let's understand the meaning of soft power. And is it actually soft and subtle, or does it also pertain to maybe sometimes flexing our muscle and showing our prowess to the world?
Not essentially, because our soft power itself is so strong, in a way hard to use the term, because if we work seriously, sincerely, in a concerted manner on our soft power, or to use a more recognized and acceptable term, which is India's cultural relations, then I believe our bilateral relations or our international relations in general would certainly be further strengthened in multiple ways, because India, since times immemorial, is known as a non-aggressor country.
Yeah.
There are very few references in the world history where Indian monarchs, Indian kings have went to
Invaded.
usurp power in a different country, in a different region. So India's nature, by nature, we are a non-aggressor kind of a country, non-aggressor kind of a society, and that is one of the strongest points of India. Of course, in the changed circumstances, we have to protect our sovereignty, and therefore we have to have the military might and also the economic prowesses also we require to strengthen, no doubt about it. But our cultural relations, in a way, have that magic of influencing the global community, what is now called as soft power.
What all comes under this? What all?
Well, a whole long list of subjects really come under cultural relations, from culinary and cuisine traditions to our typical Indian temple architecture, from our music, dance to our sculptures and ancient art for that matter. Our history itself is a soft power. Our epics are one of the most important ingredients of our soft power because they also have their foundations in our history, whether Ramayana or Mahabharata for that matter. Our languages, again, are typically our soft power. Sanskrit is the sister language of Persian because the grammatical structure of both the languages was the creation of grammarian Panini for that matter.
Okay.
And for n number of our the way we use our apparels, our fashions, again an important segment of Indian soft power. Our musical instruments are our soft power, and therefore you name our literature again is our soft power. Our democracy is our soft power. Let us not forget that.
How does that function? How does democracy become?
Because soft power is about the national philosophy. And every nation, and that has been the thinking in India, that every nation has a particular goal. It has a particular role in the Committee of Nations.
Okay.
And India has that role, which I describe as promoting the idea of spiritual democracy. Because in India, we never allowed any kind of the idea of theocracy for that matter. Any theocratic rule was never a part of our consciousness. We allowed Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti as the foundational principle of our country.
Does the idea of a Hindu Rashtra fall under the spiritual democracy?
Sorry?
Does the idea of a Hindu Rashtra fall
of
under the
course.
same concept?
Hindu Rashtra is the other name of spiritual democracy.
Okay.
Because even in Hindu, even if I consider Hindu as simply as a way of worship, then I believe Hindu religion, Hindu believers, whatever you Hindu belief system, whatever you may call it, allows you every democratic right. For example, you can worship any deity of your choice. There is no particular rule or regulation for that. There is no one book, one God, or anything which is kind of monopolistic or hegemonistic for that matter. There are multiple gods, multiple books, multiple ways of worship. Here, people undertake a fast to worship God, and they also undertake all kinds of feast-like lunches and dinners, again in worship of God.
Yeah. Okay, and where does academia and the media play a role in this? Do they?
Well, they have an important role because what has happened is, and our Prime Minister has been very rightly emphasizing and appealing people in his Pancha Prana also, he has mentioned this, that we have to throw away every remnant of that colonial legacy that we may be seeing around. Many a times we don't realize that what we are doing has some colonial elements in it, the legacy of colonialism in it. And therefore, our academia is one of the most
Killed by it?
Yeah, most prominent victims of colonial hangover, if I may. And what was required, in fact, post 1947, that we should have overhauled our higher education, our education in general, to put that indigenous content in it with some prominence. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. We continued with the same textbooks. Let's take the example. The textbooks that, for example, my mother, who went to her school in the 1940s, and whatever she learned, I learned when I also went to the school in
That
1960.
didn't change.
Yeah.
What about the new education policy now?
New education policy definitely is a watershed kind of a moment, and it drastically alters not just the syllabus but the structure, because the aim of education has been revisited, and it is not just preparing our manpower, future ready manpower. Yes, of course, that is important, but one of the significant objectives which have been mentioned in the document of new education policy is to create rootedness in the minds of our students, our future.
Does that mean going back to our roots in a
Yes,
way?
of course, of
Yeah.
course. And there is nothing new about it. Globally, people are going back to their roots, and it is very natural. It's a human tendency. We have to go back to the roots because the civilizational journey, as beautifully explained by Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay, is from the past through the present to the future. There is a continuity. And one of our very senior leaders, Arif Muhammad Khan, has described again very beautifully the journey of Indian civilization. And he says that India as a country is ever aging but never old.
What does that mean?
It means Nitya Nutan Chirapuratan. I mean, we are renewing ourselves every single day.
We're thriving.
But the core of the idea of India continues what it was maybe 1,000 years before, because that is the reason why the poet had to wonder, kya baat hai ki hasti mitati nahi hamari. It is this.
That core. Yeah. So we were talking about the diaspora. In your interaction with the diaspora, where do you think they fit into this scheme of?
Well, diaspora are the living and all-time ambassadors of the idea of India, because people will try to appreciate what India is all about through the way our diaspora people conduct themselves on a foreign soil. And therefore, how do they behave? How do they interact? How do they conduct themselves? How do they have some kind of inter-community relationship, not only between Indians and foreigners, but within Indians also? If Gujaratis and Marathis and maybe Bengalis go there, and what interactions do they have? Do they also, I mean, does that relationship also reflect our unity in diversity?
Harmony,
All issues matter. And therefore, they are one of the principal, I would say,
ambassadors.
Yeah, ambassadors of Indian culture or the idea of India in the larger context.
I've also seen that you have talked about the basic Indology in other universities. What all comes under it, and what are the changes that are made to this field?
Well, ICCR has been conducting international conferences on Indology, bringing together all Indologists as well. Recently, in the month of December, we had a gathering of people who are teaching Indic subjects, which is Indology, Sanskrit, Hindi, Ayurveda, Yoga, and so on and so forth. So all these people we had invited, basically heads of departments from various universities, and about 77 people came from 35 countries representing different universities, and they are facing challenges. But to answer your first question first and then come to this, I would say Indology is the knowledge discipline under which everything about India certainly figures. And therefore, India's history, India's ancient history, and all these things naturally acquire prominence.
So is it a dynamic subject? Does it keep changing and being?
It doesn't. That is our plea, in fact, to all the global Indologists, that they need to look at the content of Indology, what they are teaching. And Indology need not be only about the past of India. It should also be about the present of India and the future of India. So contemporary India also requires to be told, because, and this is very important, India is a country which you cannot perhaps understand simply by reading books and visiting websites. India requires experiential learning.
Experiential, yeah, learning.
And therefore, you have to spend some time in India. That is very, very required. And in that context, the entire syllabus of Indology, the course structure of Indology, the content of what is being told to them, the textbooks, everything requires to undergo a drastic change. That has been our consideration. At the same time, we have been coming across issues like if people don't, if our departments do not get students, naturally they will be under the threat of extinction.
Yeah.
Now, how to get the adequate number of students? For
Yeah.
that, you have to make it more incentivized. And in that context, Government of India also can play some role or also should play some role. But again, when it comes to incentives, merely taking care of financial things is not going to help you, because as it is, education and higher education is free in most of the countries.
Yeah, it has to have a future stream attached to it.
Correct, correct. Some employment opportunities and other things required to be associated with that.
With it. Okay, and also, what were the biggest initiatives taken under your time at the ICCR? Anything that you were really, really, personally
Well,
involved in something?
multiple initiatives, I would say, but if
But
I
where
have to
you're
mention
pick,
4 or 5 important initiatives, then I would say that ICCR started a Pratibha Sangam program a couple of years before, which is sitting abroad. There are many foreigners who are undertaking training in Indian classical music and classical dances. And they themselves are also, in a way, ambassadors of Indian culture.
Yeah.
The way passionately they pursue, let's say, Bharatanatyam or classical music or whatever, requires to be recognized. And therefore, we started conducting competitions in those countries, and those who excel, we invite them to India to present their art over here, perform over here, and that has been quite a great success. So Pratibha Sangam is one of our new flagship initiatives. Another one is our Annapurna certificate program for Indian restaurants.
Yeah.
Because as I said, culinary cuisine traditions are equally important to make people understand what India is all about. It was not for no reason that our idea of observing the International Year of Millets resonated very positively all over the globe.
Yeah.
And there were Indian restaurants that are serving foreigners there, whether in Los Angeles or in New York or in London or in Singapore, wherever. We tried to assess their performance and through our embassies recognize them. And in the first year, that was 2023, we recognized 7 such restaurants through an Annapurna certificate. A grand event was organized in Delhi.
Yes.
Himamji was present, and it went on really very well. People were very enthused and they felt very encouraged and recognized by the Government of India.
I understand that India has a philosophy, we have always had the philosophy of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, and we don't believe in ownership of any philosophy. We like it to be shared. But do you think we should have some kind of patenting or some kind of like a purist school of, like, whether it's yoga or a food, like, because it's usually appropriated a lot of times by the West?
Yes, insofar as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is concerned, which is the global community is one family.
Community, yeah.
It is not just we saying it is enough. Everybody has to say it. For example, we say Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, which means we accept multiplicity of ways of worship. Yes. And we don't consider some
it works both ways
as invalid. We never.
Yeah.
So, but this thinking has to be universalized.
Yeah.
If some other sect they consider that we are the only valid and all others are invalid, then what kind of democracy you can talk about?
That's true.
Likewise, Indian philosophy has its strength, but it requires to be made universally acceptable. On the other hand,
so you think at Ayurveda, yoga, we need to find a way to.
Similarly, insofar as the authenticity and purity of Indic knowledge systems are concerned, it is for all of us to protect it. Our Ayurveda, for example, we need to take care of the intellectual property right and patents and similar such issues. Then only we will be able to prevent adulteration of Ayurveda. Already yoga is facing that threat of adulteration.
Yeah, the
There are
different kinds
all
of yoga.
kinds of, perverted kind of approaches. There
Yes,
is some kind of beer yoga and hot yoga, which
hot
is
yoga. Yeah,
in America.
yeah,
So even our Bharatanatyam will face the same threat. Therefore,
yeah,
we need to have some authentication, first of all, defined and then preserved.
yeah.
To that end also, ICCR has established a committee. I'm sure the committee will be working and presenting its report, which is how do we authenticate the training, online and offline training given by Indians or foreigners abroad. If I am a foreign student, I need to know whether I am being taught
The
the kind
right
of
thing. Yeah.
Bharatanatyam is the authentic Bharatanatyam or is it an adulterated Bharatanatyam?
Yes.
So on that also, we are trying to have some mechanism.
Establish.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Um, I also now want to ask your views on CAA. You know, it's another way that our country is extending its influence to our neighboring countries. What are your views on it? How do you think it'll help us? You know, do you think it'll raise our position globally?
Yes, yes, of course. I mean, it's a very humanitarian thing. And see, India has been a victim of some historical
Wrongs,
some historical events, some historical things which we had to face, and one of them is partition.
partition.
So the partition was artificial, certainly not natural, and in a very inorganic manner, they bifurcated India and made into two countries.
That's
Later became three countries. But then, since bifurcation or that partition itself was unnatural, we also have to evolve some kind of new ways to deal with the situation. This should have been done way back in 1960s, but unfortunately that was not done, and therefore it was a project which was for long wanting some attention paid by the government of India, which we have done finally, and therefore the Citizenship Amendment Act stands in support of all those persecuted minorities in three neighboring countries who are now welcomed to India or who have now been welcomed in India till 31st of December 2014.
and do, how does it combine with the idea of what we thought of Akhand Bharat? Does it combine with that at all, or do you think it's just a step in the
No, no,
direction?
yes, of course, Akhand Bharat, because as it happens, in the idea of Akhand Bharat, in fact, there are many more areas. I don't go into the geography of it because
Yes.
unnecessarily it sparks some controversy. But
Hmm.
Akhand Bharat involves a huge area which is beyond the geographical boundaries of India officially, which we now recognize. Having said that, the influence of Indian culture is what, in a way, shaped the idea of Akhanda Bharat.
Hmm.
Because there are areas which have been mentioned in Mahabharata and Ramayana, and they were a part of India of those times. So naturally, in the idea of Akhanda Bharat, all these areas definitely are incorporated.
That's true.
So now, having extended this facility to those who have met India, who have taken shelter in India before 2014 because of persecution in their countries, now perhaps can experience the idea of Akhanda Bharat
Hmm.
because of our recognition to them.
Okay, great. Um, Vinayji, I was, reading up on you. You've been a Swamsevak and you've been part of the BJP, but you also had something called the Ram Bhau Bhalki Pramodini. Can you take our viewers through what it does and what's your role there?
Well, Prabodhini is a very important idea in the context of strengthening democracy. Because as it happens in democracy, you get elected because of your popularity. But your ability to get elected does not guarantee your ability to govern.
Yeah,
Ability to get elected is one thing, and ability to govern is a different thing. So, to bridge the gap between the two, some kind of human resource development is required, training is required. And
it's like
Prabodhini,
political training,
yeah, of course, and not just political, training in every other department which is required for you to be able
governance,
to lead, to be
lead.
able to govern, to be able to engage with the people. And therefore, this is a training institute, one of its kind, and it strengthens the idea of democracy because it makes democracy more delivery oriented.
So, what people who are contesting elections come here, or people who are interested?
All kinds of people do knock our door, and we provide them training in 3 areas. Number one is motivational training. Today, there is a acute crisis of purpose in politics and in our public life as well. So you have to have some noble motivation, some lofty ideals before you. And that awareness we create through motivational training, number one. Number two is your functional training. If you have to discharge your duty as a MLA, as an MLC, or as a municipal corporator, as a member of parliament, even as a minister, we provide you the training of the uh, hows and whys of legislations, of rules, regulation, functionality, procedures, everything. So that is functional training. And the third segment is skill training, because you have to be a good orator, you have to be a good writer, you have to be a good spokesperson, you have to be very presentable every time, you have to handle social media in an adroit manner. All these things we try to teach through our training programs.
That's pretty good. So, do people from other parties also come?
Yes, of course. I mean, although our party's ideological association is very clear, and in a way, BJP and people associated with BJP have been supporting us. That also goes beyond doubt. But since we are working for democracy, we also live democracy. We execute democracy. We have a very democratic approach. And insofar as our trainings are concerned, everybody is welcome. Of course, people don't come for our motivational or ideological training. That is okay.
The skill set and
But skill training and function training is common to all. So they come for that. And there are many parties who try to emulate this idea, who have eulogized our efforts, and who have welcomed this idea. Pippa Norris, just to let you know, one of the very well-known political scientists associated with the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, she has come out with a new theory called unified theory. This was early this century. And in her theory, she mentions that for democracy to succeed, just liberal democratic values are not enough. We also have to have some governance related abilities cultivated. A strong state is what she has advocated. And in that context, I believe if democracy is to be converted into a delivering democracy, training is an important part.
Okay, and to sign off, what do you think the future plans should be for ICCR? Like, you have passed on the baton. So what do you think, like, how should they take it forward? What do you think should be done immediately and in the near future?
There are many more things which we require to pay attention. Our finance minister had, in one of her budget speeches, mentioned that the government of India wants India to be converted into a global hub of higher education. Now, for that, you have to mention how India is different insofar as our knowledge traditions are concerned. So that is an unfinished agenda. We have to rope in all the universities, public, private universities, colleges, educationists, and we have to go in a big way in countries like all the southern hemisphere countries, South-South dialogue, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia. These people are looking forward to India to help them in multiple ways. And culture is an important segment. In fact, culture is something which binds us to all these civilizational nations, whether you take a couple of countries in Africa or in Southeast Asia or in Latin America. And therefore, many more things are required. But while ICCR certainly has a huge agenda, which is so far incomplete, I would urge very sincerely, and I have done that formally as well, to the Ministry of External Affairs to have some kind of a structured policy of cultural relations adopted.
What do you suggest in that?
Basically, culture should not be considered as very important, but perhaps paid little attention.
Peripheral, yeah.
Yeah. Culture has that element of familiarity breeds contempt. We believe that we know everything about culture. But that is not the case. Point is how others will know about your culture. And if culture is so important, and I would say India is the global capital of the idea of culture. Take away culture from the idea of India, and what remains?
Yeah, true.
And therefore, it is for Government of India, Ministry of External Affairs, and all of us to evolve that national cultural relations policy, which will define the role of not just ICCR, but many private players also can do that. There are many Indian industries that are working abroad. They also will be helped if they contribute to this cause.
Yes.
India requires to be made more intelligible. To put it in different words, India is a country that is very attractive and that enjoys a fund of goodwill in every nook and corner of the globe. But in the changing times, while goodwill is certainly important, not enough. Because this goodwill we should be using to convert India as a more understandable proposition. There are huge amount of misunderstandings about India.
Yeah, some like
Misperceptions
for
about
safety and all. There's a lot of
and
propaganda.
who would do away these misperceptions? It is for all of us to do that.
Yeah, everyone to
If
do.
misperceptions persist, what kind of cultural relations are we talking about?
True.
So, number of things we require.
Okay. Thank you, Vinay. Thank you for your time. And we hope to chat with you again very soon. Thank you for your time today.
Namaskar. Dhanyavad.
Namaste.
Thank you.